PO refers to provoking operation, not Kung Fu Panda. It was created by Edward de Bono as part of a lateral thinking technique. It is used as a prefix to a radical statement designed to provoke new ideas. Consider a statement like this: I have a secured but vulnerable system. It sounds absurd. How is it possible? By means of deception. It is nothing new. Deception predates humanity. It is used for survival in the animal kingdom, perhaps even dinosaurs. From a technical standpoint, the first practical deceptive tool is known as a honeypot. A honeynet is when 2 or more honeypots are deployed in a given environment. Open source HoneyNet project has been around for a long time. In the commercial space, there are a number of players. The cumulative market between 2017 to 2022 is valued at $12 billion US, not rupee, with a compound annual growth rate at 19%. Of course, this may all be a lie. Jokes aside, compared to signature-based products, deception produces higher quality alerts, acts as deterrence and deflection. Some of the key obstacles to widespread adoption are complexity and risks. Traditional HoneyNets require high skill sets to deploy and maintain, thus it is more suited for threat and malware research. New startups innovate to address the problems with traditional HoneyNet, to help businesses to address the problem of alert fatigue and mislead threat actors away from the real assets. Threat actors, like any humans, are equally susceptible to deception. Deception is useful for various stages of attacks: the reconnaissance phase, as well as post-intrusion or exploitation phase. Reconnaissance is a fancy word for information gathering. How would the attacker know if the system is vulnerable? By querying the version of the software or firmware. What happens if the system reports a fake version? The attacker will most likely use the wrong exploit. There are other trickery in the forms of fake usernames and passwords stored in various areas of the operating system that normal business users are unlikely to dig, but will trigger alerts when used by an attacker. Modern deception are staged less frequently or dynamically generated on the fly, unlike signature-based products that require constant update of signatures. While looking at this topic, I came across a paper by Topspin Security which I found useful. There are academic papers which are good for literature survey and helping with my insomnia. Topspin's paper, on the other hand, has practical coverage of more modern deceptive mechanisms. It used reasonably sound methodology. A series of capture the flag challenges were conducted to test the theories, and to study the response of skilled participants who are professional penetration testers and threat researchers. The results from the test and their analysis are informative and insightful. As with any studies, it is not for us to agree with totally, but to apply some critical thinking. Figure 2 from the paper illustrates active deception and detection mechanisms. Beacon are mechanisms built into files, which send signals to a predefined server when accessed. A decoy is a fake asset resembling any legitimate computing component within a network system. Some deception technologies go as far as simulating realistic end-user activities within the decoys. These beacon traps mislead the attacker by pointing or facilitating access to another decoy within the HoneyNet, effectively wasting their time and giving defenders time to respond or gather indicators of compromise that are relevant to the actual environment for specific search or hunting. Data analysis in this case refers to the consumption of fake data. It could be a fabricated instructional document that contains a username and password to a fake file transfer protocol site. Whenever the credentials are in use, it will trigger an alert to the system administration or security operations. To avoid false alarms, these traps need to be placed in a manner that is unlikely for legitimate users to view or use. Topspin categorizes traps into 4 distinct types: files, applications, network, and credentials. Fake data and passwords can be easily planted into the 3 types of traps other than the network type. Instead of going through the details of each trap here, please read the paper for more details. Let's focus on the findings of the paper. Whenever an attacker gains entry into a system, it is typically known as post-exploitation or intrusion. At that juncture of attack, the adversary needs to gather information so as to gain situational awareness. This information gathering is accomplished through the use of shell commands in the background, since there could be an active user on the machine. In Topspin's paper, the gap between reality and the perception of the attacker was termed as the knowledge gap. This gap becomes progressively smaller as the CTF participants gain better situational awareness as reflected by the diminishing number of commands used. In our attack lifecycle model, we termed such activities as internal reconnaissance, which is related to probing of the internal network after an intrusion, as opposed to probing internet-facing services. This is the main reason why we deliberately distinct between external and internal reconnaissance in our model. It goes without saying that when internal probing is detected, such events should be treated with higher priority. This spray and pray behavior as highlighted in the paper is unlikely of a professional offensive campaign. The participants may have used such noisy approach because they are aware that the environment is staged for research. A CTF environment is typically devoid of live user activities. This knowledge could have influenced the use of more overt probing methods. A careful adversary is likely to avoid poorly implemented honeypots, which is part of their operation security or OPSEC. From the defender's perspective, it can serve as a form of deterrence. Next, we look at the statistics for trap consumption. There was an average of 3 traps being consumed. The top 3 types are shown in the slide: document, application and email traps. At this point, you may wonder what's the point of this metric. Topspin also tested malware within the same research environment. They compared the differences in terms of trap appetite between human and malware. Malware that are automated in behavior tend to look for highly structured data in applications and browsers. Some sophisticated malware also looked into documents. Humans on the other hand are much more diverse, but with a clear preference for documents at 77%. Beacon traps were triggered equally in percentage by both human and malware, at 25%. The main intention of Topspin was to plant diverse traps so as to observe attack patterns, as an indication to what kind of attacker is on the network. Is it human or machine? Here's a more detailed view of the percentages. It was noted that none of the selected malware attacks touched email, Internet of Things or network-based traps. I used the word selected because of the recent report of electric utility-specific malware that will sabotage systems automatically once it gets into the network. In other words, it doesn't mean malware will never touch emails, IoT or network. WannaCry ransomware uses network exploits to spread. Since the participants were tasked to look for files of certain hashes, it followed that files were the highest consumed type of traps. The easiest way to finish off a find the hash challenge is to use a brute force manner to compute all the hashes for all the files. This is related to attackers' intel, which is discussed next. Just take note that this number is indicative for this particular experiment design. It may not be reflective of all breaches. It really depends what the adversary's mission is. The paper also highlighted the significance of attacker intelligence prior to the mission. In Topspin's experiments, strong hint was given to the participants as to where to find the first 5 files to simulate mission intelligence. The researchers observed participants who took heed of the hint took less commands to locate the right files compared to those who didn't. In other words, if the attacker has gathered specific intelligence for the mission, the more difficult it becomes for the defender to detect. As such, it is critical to have early detection since attackers will progressively become more stealthy as they dwell longer in the network, as shown earlier with the diminishing number of commands needed as they progress to a later stage of the CTF. In summary, deception works. A high diversification of traps is key to high detection rates. Traps are equally useful for detecting post-exploitation by misleading them into a fabricated reality. By correct context, we mean planting enough details to make it look convincing for the threat agent, be it human or malware. Realism and secrecy are crucial to effective deception. Malware analysis sandboxes evolved from honeypot automated data collection and analysis. They became popular as a form of breach detection. Unfortunately, malware authors began to incorporate techniques to evade analysis. We can in fact take advantage of this to fool evasive malware so as to trick them from not running. In the next sharing, I will further explain how deception can be systematically deployed within this attack lifecycle framework.